How do you evaluate these demonstrations, and in general, how did these movements change in the Hungarian public life?
I see that there is a provocative competition between the opposition parties. The opposition party is not easy, and especially if the government does a lot of things, as has just been announced, we will change a lot of things in the economy and in politics. At times like this, the opposition has two options, either constructive, talks about proposals, makes additions, wants to improve it, or leave the whole thing and rather turn to provocations. Now, in Hungary, I see that we are facing the latter. It would be good, of course, to think that they are here around the radio because Laszlo brought them the expected interview, but I don't think it's about that.
But why don't you agree with what you think? Because they say that the right to gather is now being violated because the country has started on a path that is not desirable.
Yes, it is obvious that it is not as they say, but they also know it. It can be seen on them. In Hungary, the absurd situation is that they even close the bridges. I would say a few words about this. And they say that Hungary is the end of democracy. It is not possible to gather more while they are just gathering. So I want to say that the events themselves are spoiling their positions. It is not about this, but about a political race. There will be an election in Hungary in a year. There is a re-election in the area of opposition parties. They are struggling with visibility problems, and since they are not constructive opponents, they are competing with each other in government opposition and provocations. At the same time, I understand this. We have to understand each other. After all, we belong to a national community, but we could also look at each other. I understand that someone has a law against them, especially when it comes to the case of Prague. When the liberals always cry, this is a topic, but we should be respectful, as they should be. I think it is not possible to close bridges according to the law. The statement of opinion and the opinion of freedom is based on the fact that the lives of other people are not necessarily limited. Closing bridges in a sport-like way, almost like a sports performance, first one, then the other, and the third, is not normal. And I think the non-demonstrating majority has the right to live their lives in a normal way.
Based on what you say, will there be a legislative step from the government?
We are thinking about it. We see that there is a wave. There was a wave in the parliament. We have not seen anything like this yet. It would be logical for that place to have some value. It is there historically. I think it does not matter what happens there. They smoke in the parliament. Then closing bridges, closing roads. So there is some tension here on the opposition side. We have to be aware of the government side and the majority. We should not react too violently with legislative changes, but I think the closing of bridges may have brought a lesson that the closing of bridges or the attention of the non-demonstrating majority should be guaranteed by the law.
We will see what steps will be taken in this matter, but it is certain that the government will extend the Hungarian village program. If we look back at the past decades, it was more the worldwide trend that people moved to the city or around the city from the small villages, and the result of this process was the unpopulation of these areas. In this awareness, what is the reason that the Hungarian village program is now being extended?
There is a huge literature in this debate that the modern world needs to bring the urbanization. In the modern world, the most important thing is efficiency. How to organize a service effectively, how to make it easier for people to work, and the other side of this is how to make the most money. The most money can be made by gathering people in a small place where services are needed. For the providers of services, this is the result of cost-cutting. This is all against the way of life of the village, not only in Hungary, but all over the world. I think politics is not about putting financial points first. There are other, more valuable points. For example, the tradition of a country, its urban structure, that the country should be inhabited, and so on. I think the village is a great tradition and a serious source of power. If we go to the east, we will find very few villages like this. The Hungarian village is an eco-social unity. In the past, every condition for quality of life was given, for example, in my childhood. After the regime change, the village started to decline. Maybe we can talk about this phenomenon earlier, but then it accelerated. Now we are facing the future of the Hungarian village. In my opinion, as a villager, the village does not belong to the past, but to the future. This bustling urban lifestyle, some people like it, some people don't like it. This constant traffic, this bustling life in a big city may be attractive for the majority of young people, but for the family members, peace, accountability, healthy environment, personal acquaintance with neighbors, the security that your environment and other people's acquaintances give you, these are attractive things. In my opinion, the majority of family members would rather live in a village than move to a big city. And they are also citizens of the country, so the point of view of the villagers should also be evaluated in national politics. The villages should not be built down, but should be built up. Moreover, I believe that if we are right here and we measure the development of the future well, then due to urban problems, there will always be a sign of displacement. Budapest also suffers or encounters such a thing. The viewer's question is whether we consider it suffering. When the urban settlements and those who can afford it, especially if the state, for example, helps the rural home creation, then it is important that they move out of the cities. And there is a garden city displacement. So the Hungarian village not only has the traditional form that was built on agriculture in the past, but now the village culture built on the background of non-agricultural can also find a future, especially if the village is not similar to the end of the world. So if the government really succeeds, why wouldn't it succeed? So that within 30 minutes, everyone from the country's most remote village can reach a 4-lane highway. So that if the internet is accessible everywhere, if services are free, if there is a shop, if there is a car, now we have made such decisions. So the modern conditions of the village become attractive. I don't hope for what I'm talking about, because it may seem like a windmill fight. We are facing a global trend, but no, because since we started the Hungarian village program, we have counted 1,200 villages where population consumption has stopped. So I think that good things can come out of the will of the government and the will of the people in the case of village life.
Now, there are 4 areas that the government is involved in. A campaign to support shops and pubs is underway. There is a church renovation program and a plan to install a cash machine. Why are these the 4 areas that have been chosen? First of all, it does not seem that there is a connection between us.
This is rather a new element of the Hungarian village program. So it's not that we're only dealing with the Hungarian village program, because a Hungarian village program where schools, nurseries, renovations, cemeteries are restricted. So the necessary background of human life has been strengthened, and we have strengthened it. Our parliamentary representative from Sorda is leading this program. He is one of our most successful politicians, and he himself is one of the most successful programmers. The Hungarian village program will be expanded with new elements, so we are not talking about a new thing, not a new program, but new program elements. Small shops are a recurring problem. If there are no shops, it is difficult to live in a village. There was a big debate, a philosophical debate within the government, that now the spirit of the village is wherever it is, in the pub or in the church. In the end, we made a decision and we renewed the pubs and churches and strengthened them. And the ATM is also important. It is one of the most difficult things to solve, how and at whose expense we can solve it. We have an agreement with the banks to provide access to cash to every village. You need an ATM everywhere, but we are modernizing the village, so we are preserving its traditions. This is a valuable settlement and community life in Hungary. We do not want to give it up. The people living there would like to continue this. Young people and families are interested. I think we have every reason to make the village program one of the most important programs.
You mentioned families. This week, the Parliament submitted a proposal on the safety of mothers under 30 years of age and how the government will continue to expand the personal income tax.
Of course, there are measures that we have already discussed and are being updated because the legislation that implements was submitted to the Parliament. I think that is why we are talking about it now. But in reality, beyond the specific measures, there is a very important and historical dimension of the dispute here in Hungary. Maybe in the Western civilization there is this dispute everywhere. What do we see as the foundation of society, the individual or the family? If the family, as the national conservatives say, then this thought must appear in the economic regulations. If we are liberals and we see the individual as the smallest and starting point, then another regulation is needed. Because in the way of thinking that puts the individual in the middle, the family does not appear as an important issue. It is a private matter who lives how. But for the community, it does not matter if children are born and the traditional way of life remains. That is why the national conservatives say that the basic element of society, of national life, is the family. And we take this into account and accept it. And if this is the case, then we should build our economic system. We should build our tax system. The tax system should respect and help the families. Depending on how many children there are, they should help raising children. Let's say that this is a common national goal of society, that those who raise children should not live worse than those who do not take children. Now we are talking about, but in reality, the Hungarian economic system is becoming a family center. And we are in the first place in the world in this. There are such initiatives, but in such a comprehensive approach as to what we do, for example, that mothers should be tax-free for the rest of their lives, or they can demand family tax benefits not only on the mother's or father's side, but on both sides as a family. These are new things. These are not in the Western world. I think this is what the future is for. Then the others will follow us. This is often the case. Migration, war, and so on. This is where the Hungarian position precedes the European position, and the others will come after us. I think this can happen here as well. The Western world will realize that if it does not give respect, appreciation, support, and recognition to families, then it loses something that makes it very difficult to build a happy life and a successful economic system. So I think the future is in the family-centric economic systems. Hungary is the first country to realize this in Europe.
At the same time, we have talked several times about the fact that despite the increase in family subsidies, inflation, which in February was the highest in Hungary and the European Union, in the interest of reducing it. Based on the information so far, the price of the 1,000 products only decreased by 900. How satisfied was the government with the results so far?
According to the data I work from, by 874 products, and the average price decrease is somewhere between 17 and 18%. This is a big deal. I don't know if this has ever happened in the history of Hungary. So there was a stock market system where we prevented prices from rising. But to achieve that prices fall, I think, according to my memories, there was no such thing in modern Hungarian history. I was also excited when we started this thing, because it is a risky thing. If a question arises, the first suggestion is always to take down the dossier, where we have already dealt with a similar case before. Let's open it up. How was it then? We have to build on this. But if a question arises, there is no prior dossier. There was no prior dossier, and in this case, social unions, especially business, families on one side, merchants, importers, food industry workers, producers on the other side. This is a very complicated and sensitive union system. If you don't have a prior experience in this, it is a serious political and intellectual risk. So I was also worried whether this would work or not. We thought 16 times about every step to be careful, but after 2 years, I have to say that it works. So it flies. It is an operating regulatory system. We are Hungarians, and we are also facing international chains. I am sure there will be an effort on the part of the merchants to get out of this, somehow, and to get the money that they don't get. They just want to go and buy. They paid 100 forints for a product, and now they pay 80. A lot of merchants think that the government doesn't tell them how much the price is. Now we say that 10% is enough, but a lot of people think that if it could be 11%, 12%, or 20%, 30%, why not try it? I am sure there will be attempts to somehow get out of this price-breaking policy of the government. There are still 2 to 3 steps that we can take if the merchants don't want this new situation. We are in a constant struggle, and part of my job, if not daily but weekly, is to negotiate with our trusted government secretary, Robert Zigo, how the prices are. That's why I can say quite surprising numbers, that there are products where the prices are not 17–18%, but more than 50%. Milk, yogurt, milk products, fat products, they are 50% lower. We announce the price regulation hoping that the situation and the merchants will see that we have to reach 10%. I think there will be attempts to get out of the regulation that we have to stop. And at the end of May, there will be a big debate about whether to continue or not.
Let's continue with a topic that is not relevant to our daily lives, but it might be in the future. The European Commission recommends a 72-hour lockdown for EU citizens. What do you think? What is the reason for this request from Brussels?
I don't know what the Commission thinks, but the member states want it to be stopped. First of all, in Hungarian households, there is usually enough food for 72 hours. I don't know how they live in Western Hungary. If I go into a Hungarian room, it won't be a problem for 72 hours, 72 days. But the situation is that we have to stop and try to understand why they are doing this. And I see that Brussels is preparing for a war. We have to take this seriously. It seems funny that Brussels is telling all European families to keep enough food for 72 hours. But if you look behind this, you are surprised. Are they preparing for something? I don't see Europe being threatened by a war. There is a Russian-Ukrainian war hundreds of kilometers away on the Eastern Front. But for this war to come from Ukraine to Europe, to Budapest, Warsaw, or the Baltic states, there are speculations, but there is no reality. Anyone who attacks a NATO member state has no reality. If someone is preparing for a war, it is because they want to start a war. So Brussels either wants to continue the war that is going on because the supporters of Ukraine joined the war. Hungary stayed out of it. We are on the peaceful side. We don't send weapons. We don't send soldiers. But there are countries in the EU like Brussels who want to get involved in this war. They want to keep peace. I feel that a political preparation for a deeper war is taking place with news about keeping food for 72 hours. I would like to tell the Hungarian families that they don't have to do anything extraordinary. The war is not threatening. Hungary is not joining the war. We are on the peaceful side. Even if Europe joins the war, we will not join it.
Yesterday in Paris, the leaders of Europe met with the supporters of Ukraine and promised security guarantees to Ukraine. What is the reason why the talks between Russia and Ukraine are continuing and progress is made? What is the reason why the US and EU are getting further away from the war?
Some European countries and the Brussels bureaucracy want war. The US president wants peace. We are witnesses that America is on the peaceful side. It is working for ceasefire and peace. European countries are working for war. The Americans did the same. Before the arrival of President Trump, Americans and Europeans were united. They were on the war side. The new American leadership wants peace. I think we should support the peace efforts of the US. We should not plan a war against the US as most European countries do. Some of us do not agree with this. Hungary represents this opinion. The Slovaks are not happy. The Italians do not agree with the Slovaks. Some countries feel that Europe should move towards peace and not war. This may hurt the pride of some European countries. The truth is, we should support the Americans. I think we Europeans got an opportunity when the Minsk Agreement was a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. We Europeans decided that this agreement should be signed by the two biggest European military powers, France and Germany. The Minsk Agreement was signed by 4 countries. The truth is, we could not sign this agreement. The European guarantee was not enough. It turned out that Europe does not have enough power to sign such a peace agreement. The answer is not war. We should find someone who can sign it. If we Europeans do not know, we should bring in the Americans. They have a bigger chance to stop the war and bring peace. If you want peace, you should support the Americans. It is rare in modern politics to say this, but it is true.
Let's talk about another news. The Szájes-Curran-Fagyas disease appeared again in Hungary. This time it was identified in the village of Győrmöson-Sopronvár. What steps have been taken to stop the disease?
There is the disease. It appeared in a village of Nagybágyos. Now it is in a village called Level. We diagnosed it in Győrmöson-Sopronvár. We have to make serious decisions. We have to stop the disease. The disease is coming from neighboring countries. This time from Slovakia. We have to cross the border and export the disease. Life slows down there. If the disease became national, it would have serious consequences on the national level. Now there are more serious consequences locally. I have been to both Kisbágyos and Nagybágyos. Many people worked in these zoos. Their families were deported. They exported the animals. There is no work. This is a serious problem for the families living there. I was there with the Minister of Agriculture. His job is to provide economic support so that they are safe from the disease. We are working on this. The other thing is that we have to prevent further spread. We have to work together with our neighbors in Austria and Slovakia.